Hi, I'm Jeffrey, and this is Autoalchemy, the intersection between typology and self-growth. If you are familiar with my channel, then you probably have some idea of what your personality type is. But do you know what your type is, romantically speaking? That's the real question. Let's try to find some answers. As always, I want to start off by thanking you for checking out my channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now, when it comes to romantic compatibility, there's a lot of conflicting conventional wisdom out there. Some people say birds of a feather flock together, while others say opposites attract. As for me, I'm just here to square these ideas with the framework of typology. But before I dive into any theoretical nitty-gritty, I want to say a word about this video's sponsor, Boo. Boo is a personality-based social app that you can use to find friends and dates that you actually vibe with. Boo allows you to filter out users that don't match your personality preferences, saving you time, effort, and probably even a little embarrassment. If you download the app now and use promo code Alchemy, you'll receive 50% off of your first month of Boo Infinity. Try it out if you're looking for some like-minded souls, or maybe even your very own Boo Thang. Alright, so before we can even talk effectively about compatibility and personality type, we need some working definition of what compatibility actually is. Sometimes you interact with a person and it feels like you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Everything is awkward, everything is fumbled, your words don't land exactly as they were supposed to, your intentions are misread. This is not an example of compatibility, if I do say so myself. And that's not usually what we're looking for. Instead, people seem to be seeking out friendships and relationships where things run relatively smoothly. I'm talking about those relationships where even our differences are contributing to the whole, forming these places of tension and then harmony. It's all working together like the separate layers of a great piece of music. When we're compatible, your bass line supports my drum beat and vice versa. And no, I'm not flirting with you. Get that out of your head. So, broadly speaking, that's how I think about compatibility. Unlike some other personality theorists, I don't happen to believe that compatibility can be reduced to very straightforward formulaic grids. We are human beings, we're not algebraic beings, and besides that, there's more to compatibility than typology alone. Mindset matters, your religious views matter, your political views matter, what kind of car you drive matters. Hashtag Toyota gang. Now, despite those caveats, there are definitely some general guidelines to think about when you're looking at compatibility and type. Let's go back to those two basic relationship proverbs, the birds of a feather versus opposites attract. My personal theory is that these are both valid approaches to compatibility that exist independently of typology. For the sake of being formal and a little bit fancy, let's call the birds of a feather approach a parallel approach to compatibility, and let's call opposites attract a perpendicular approach. Now, figuring out which of these approaches makes more sense for you should be relatively simple. All you have to do is take inventory of the previous relationships that you've had, and I'm talking romantic or otherwise. It doesn't matter necessarily if you haven't had a romantic relationship. You are essentially trying to decipher upon what you are building your connections. Are you drawn in by the familiar, or do you find the enigmatic other somehow compelling? Let's start off by talking about the parallel approach. One thing that I've noticed in my own life is that I have a strong preference for interacting with other extroverted intuition users. Now, obviously, I can get along with anybody of any type, but there's a sort of ease and playfulness that comes along when I'm meeting someone who also has NE. This smoothness of interaction is maybe the major selling point of a parallel approach to compatibility. You meet people and you're automatically operating with similar assumptions about how the world works. It can be very easy to dive right in, building a relationship with that person because it feels, in some way, as if you've known them for your entire life. Of course, the big danger of the parallel approach is stagnation. Imagine if I was dating another ENTP, for example. Sure, we might easily get along on some fundamental level, but then there's also a good chance that we might miss out on something that life has to offer because we will share similar blind spots. So one takeaway there is, the more similar you and your partner are, the more intentional and deliberate you'll have to be about challenging yourselves to push beyond your comfort zones. Because the fact is, it's going to be a lot less likely to happen all on its own without this chemical tug and pull of basic differences. Now, if you do prefer a parallel approach to compatibility, then what you're going to want to look for are shared savior functions, and that's basically a term that I'm stealing from the objective personality system. You can think of it as being the primary and auxiliary functions, although in OP there is some leeway where the third function can actually function as the auxiliary in a manner of speaking. For more on that, check out my video, Am I ENTP? How to Know, which actually doubles as a primer on some OP concepts. Okay, so as a standard ENTP, I'm going to have parallel compatibility with other NE saviors. And so what that means is, all other things being equal, I'm going to get along swimmingly with other ENTPs, ENFPs, and roughly half of the INTPs, INFPs, ESFJs, and ESTJs. Now, from personal experience, I also think that the auxiliary savior contributes to parallel compatibility, so that means we can add any TI users that I missed before into the mix now. All right, and now we're going to take a look at the perpendicular approach to compatibility. Keep in mind that this approach is built on that principle of opposites attracting. The perpendicular approach is fueled by a sense of wonder and curiosity. In the other person, you perceive a chance to explore the mysteries of life, a chance to move beyond the lopsided lenses that you use to view the world. Now, this approach can lead to stagnation as well, particularly if both of the people involved decide that they want to go all in on their saviors and they want to specialize so that now neither one of them has the opportunity to grow into the other's territory. The other danger for people who prefer a perpendicular approach to compatibility is actually quite the opposite. So there's also a chance for a complete erosion of boundaries of identity. What I mean is, you can start to take on so much of the other person's standpoint that you begin to lose the stable footing of your own unique vantage. If it's not clear here, my point is that there's going to be a drawback to pretty much any approach to compatibility, and so you should be aware of those drawbacks before you dive in so that you can actually try to anticipate them and make plans for them. Anyway, if you've determined that you do prefer a perpendicular approach to compatibility, then what you're going to want to look for is the inherent tension of your daemon functions. And a daemon function is basically just the function on the other end of the savior axis. So now I'll demonstrate the perpendicular approach using myself once again as an example. As a standard ENTP, I'm going to have perpendicular compatibility with SI saviors. So that's going to be ISFJs, ISTJs, and now the other half of the INTPs, INFPs, ESTJs, and ESFJs. And now with the auxiliary daemon, we can add in any FE saviors that we missed. All right, so at this point, I'm sure the keen eyes out there have noticed that there are exactly 4 types in common between the parallel and perpendicular lists for the standard ENTP. That would be the NE-FE ENTPs, the FE-NE ESFJs, the TI-SI INTPs, and the SI-TI ISFJs. With these 4 types, I have what I call complementarity, which is to say, my personal hunch is that these 4 types might be ideal for providing me with both a sense of common ground, but also that opportunity to grow and push the boundaries of my personality. Now, in particular, I'm also suspecting that the middle 2 options would have the most complementarity because they're also going to bring in that balance of being double observers. All right, so if you want these ideals converted into a general suggestion, regardless of your personality type, then I would wager that the best blend of perpendicular and parallel compatibility can be found by A, seeking out your quadramates, so basically anybody who has the same 4 cognitive functions in their stack. B, seeking out jumper types if you are a standard type like myself, or seeking out standard types if you're a jumper. And C, as a little bonus, seeking out someone who leads with one of your middle 2 functions. By the way, you might have noticed in my ENTP example that the NTJs and the SFPs were completely missing from either of the approaches to compatibility. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that anybody who's an INTJ, ENTJ, ISFP, ESFP would be a bad match for me. All that it really means is that their functions, by my mathematics anyway, cancel each other out. So with SE, for example, it's neither perpendicular nor parallel to NE. In fact, to me, it seems just as close to NE as it is to SI. So basically, there's always going to be one quadra that doesn't share any functions with your personality type, and the types in that particular quadra are going to live in this weird neutral land when it comes to compatibility. And again, I'm not saying that you should avoid anyone who lives in that neutral territory. All that I'm saying is this math isn't going to work out, and you might have to approach it a little more experimentally. You might have to think about this as the laboratory of your life, and you're learning what works and what doesn't work when it comes to these neutral types. Maybe you decipher that you happen to really enjoy other NT types, regardless of what quadra they're in, regardless of what particular functions they're using. And so that's the kind of thing that can be really helpful to figure out, even if you might get some cuts and bruises and scrapes along the way. All right, that's all I've got today, so thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Please let me know any thoughts you have about compatibility down below. I will catch you guys next time. Goodbye.